The morning bell. Liam sat at the kitchen table, legs swinging beneath the chair, sketchbook open to a half-finished drawing of a robot with a shield. Outside, the sun filtered through the curtains like honey. His mother, apron dusted with flour, packed his lunch while humming a familiar tune. His father sat silently in the corner, sipping coffee, eyes glued to the morning news. Headlines scrolled past. Asterisk, another school lockdown, 3rd this month. Asterisk, eat your toast, baby, his mother said, glancing toward the clock. Liam nodded, tearing a piece off and chewing slowly. He didn't speak much in the mornings, or really at all, unless he was talking about his drawings. They were easier than words. At school, the halls buzzed with backpacks swinging and sneakers squeaking. Liam moved quietly, hugging his sketchbook to his chest. He met eyes with Jordan, his seatmate and only real friend. Jordan grinned and mimed a superhero landing. "You bring Captain Shield today," he whispered. Liam nodded, smiling just a little. The bell rang. Mrs. Harding clapped her hands twice. "Okay, class. Journal's out. 5 minutes of quiet writing." Liam reached for his pencil. Then, asterisk bang asterisk. A loud, metallic thud echoed down the hallway. The kind of sound that didn't belong inside a school. A second bang followed. Screams. Chair scraped. Mrs. Harding's face turned pale. "Everyone down," she said, her voice shaking. She locked the door, flicked off the lights. "Back wall. Now." Liam crawled under his desk. Jordan slid next to him, breathing hard. Somewhere across the room, someone sobbed. The hallway outside was silent again, too silent. Liam's ears rang. His fingers trembled. He opened his sketchbook. Captain Shield stood tall on the page, arms stretched wide, protecting a group of children behind him. Liam added a new line, thicker, bolder, across the shield. He didn't look up when footsteps passed the door. He didn't blink when someone tried the handle. Minutes became hours. Then came the knock. "It's over. You're safe." Police officers escorted the class outside. The sun was still shining, but it felt colder somehow. Parents waited at the curb, faces drawn with panic. Liam's mother wrapped him in her arms, hands gripping tighter than usual. "It was just a threat," someone said. No shots fired, but the fear had already settled deep, like dust in old corners. That night, Liam sat on his bed, sketchbook balanced on his knees. He flipped past Captain Shield and began a new page. This time, the hero sat alone, mask pulled off, a tear rolling down his cheek. Outside his window, the wind stirred the leaves. Inside, Liam kept drawing, quietly, carefully, as if the right image might hold the world together. Backfire. Marcus Hayes stared at his reflection in the locker room mirror. The fluorescent light flickered above, humming softly, casting tired shadows across his face. 12 years on the force had weathered him, gray threading through his beard, lines etched beneath his eyes. But it was the quiet weight in his chest that made him feel old. He adjusted his vest, clipped on his badge, and gave a short nod to his own reflection. "Stay sharp," he muttered. The night shift began like any other. Routine patrols, static from the radio, the distant wail of sirens that never seemed to stop. His rookie partner, Diaz, tapped a nervous rhythm on the dash, eyes scanning every corner like he hadn't blinked since sundown. Then the call came in. Possible armed suspect. Convenience store on East 9th. Witnesses report a male, dark hoodie, object in hand. Marcus tightened his grip on the wheel. When they arrived, the store lights flickered behind smeared glass. A man darted from the alleyway, hoodie up, something glinting in his hand. Marcus shouted, "Police! Stop!" The figure turned halfway. No clear view. Just motion, adrenaline, and instinct. Diaz yelled, "He's got something." The shot fired before Marcus realized his finger had moved. The figure dropped. Hard. The object, a black plastic toy gun, clattered beside him. Silence fell like snow. Marcus took slow, dragging steps toward the body. The suspect couldn't have been older than 16. Blood pooled beneath him, warm and red and far too much. Diaz's voice buzzed in Marcus's earpiece, calling for backup, for medics, for someone to make sense of what had just happened. But Marcus stood still, rooted to the pavement, his gun trembling in his hand. 2 hours later, back at the precinct, He gave a statement. Words came in fragments. Didn't see clearly movement, perceived threat. He had said them before, textbook phrases, but tonight they felt hollow, like echoes in a tin can. Placed on administrative leave, Marcus returned home to silence. No TV, no news, just the hum of the refrigerator and the weight of memory pressing against his ribs. He sat on the back porch, head in his hands, watching his son play in the yard. A toy gun, bright orange, but shaped too real, glinted in his son's hand as he aimed at invisible villains. Marcus's heart lurched. His palms broke into sweat. "Dylan," he called softly. "Come here, bud." His son trotted over, smiling. Marcus knelt, took the toy gently, and without a word, tossed it into the trash bin. Dylan looked confused. "Did I do something wrong?" Marcus shook his head, pulling him into a hug. "No," he whispered, "but some things don't belong in our hands." He looked out into the dark, his jaw tight. Somewhere behind his eyes, the alley reappeared over and over again, and the shot kept echoing. Crossfire. The screen stayed dark for a few seconds longer than expected. Then a voice, steady but worn, broke the silence. "My name is Janelle Rivers. I used to run. Now I remember." The image faded in, a woman in her late 20s, seated in a sunlit room, framed by bookshelves and soft shadows. Her wheelchair was visible only in the lower corner, almost out of frame, like something she'd learned to live with but never quite accepted. She took a breath. It was a Friday night, senior year. I was 2 months from graduating film school. I had a backpack full of screenplays and a heart full of fire. I didn't know what silence meant yet. Her voice didn't tremble, but her eyes told a different story. She described the bar, too loud, too crowded, too alive. Music pulsed through the floorboards, drinks clinked against wood, friends laughed around her. She was in the middle of a joke when the first shot rang out. "It was like the sound tore the ceiling open," she said. At first, nobody moved. Then panic cracked open the crowd like lightning. She remembered falling, not because she was shot, yet, but because someone shoved her, trying to run. Then came more shots. Closer. Louder. I remember looking up. I saw the shooter's face. He looked bored. Not angry. Not afraid. Just empty. One bullet. That's all it took. Through her spine. Down went her fire, her laughter, her future as she had planned it. "I wasn't supposed to survive," she said. "But I did. That's the catch. The bullet stops, but the damage echoes." She talked about the hospital, the surgeries, the half-friends who faded away with awkward apologies, the projects she never finished, the dreams she folded up and tucked in drawers. "I didn't write for a year. Couldn't. Everything I wanted to say felt too big or too small. But then, in a quiet moment, she picked up a pen. Not to write a film, but to write the truth. I wrote about fear, about anger, about the way no one talks about what happens after the shooting stops." Her journal became a refuge, a rehearsal space for healing, and then, slowly a weapon. "I realize I don't need to hold a camera to tell a story. I am the story." She looked out the window. The light touched her face like a second chance. "I'm still in the crossfire, not of bullets anymore, but of memory, of policy, of silence. But I have a voice." She wheeled herself toward a desk in the corner of the room. A laptop blinked to life. "I lost a lot that night," she said, "but I didn't lose everything." The screen faded to black, and the quiet that followed felt like a heartbeat waiting to speak. Trigger Nation. The gymnasium was silent, except for the low hum of the projector. Rows of folding chairs stretched wall to wall, filled with students, parents, teachers, and officers. The lights dimmed. On the screen, Janelle's face appeared again, this time in a short documentary. Her voiceover began. "We don't always get to choose the moment that changes us, but we do choose what we do with it." In the back row, Liam sat next to his mother, sketchbook open on his lap. He wasn't drawing, just listening. His pencil rested quietly between his fingers. On the page, a new character had started to take form, a storyteller, cloaked in light instead of armor. Across the aisle, Officer Marcus Hayes leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His badge was still on leave, but he wore it anyway. Not to show authority, but to show up. His eyes didn't leave the screen. Janelle spoke of resilience, of using her story not as a wound to reopen, but as a bridge. We are not statistics. We are not background noise. We are people with names and histories. We are survivors, and we are witnesses. After the screening, a counselor stepped up to the podium. Then a student. Then a teacher. One by one, people began to share, not statistics, not headlines, but lived moments. The ripple moved across the room like a wave, not of grief, but of clarity. Marcus stood. He didn't speak like a cop. He spoke like a father. I used to think silence was strength, that staying composed meant staying in control. But silence is not peace. It's paralysis. He paused. I took a life because I didn't have the full picture. And that mistake, 1 second long, will live with me forever. No applause followed. Just stillness. Listening had replaced judgment. Then, something unexpected happened. Liam raised his hand. He walked to the front, small and quiet, sketchbook pressed to his chest like a shield. I made something, he said, voice barely above a whisper. It's not big, it's not loud, but it's mine. He turned the sketchbook around. A series of panels showed Captain Shield not in battle, but in a classroom, in a courtroom, at a dinner table, listening, protecting not with weapons, but with presence. A teacher wiped a tear. Janelle nodded from the screen. In that moment, the room shifted. Not solved, not healed, but opened. Trigger Nation wasn't just a title, it was a reality. A network of lives threaded together by fear, loss, and silence. But within that thread, something else had started to form, a voice. Small, wounded, but rising. Outside, the wind rustled through the flags at half-mast. Inside, stories had taken root in hearts no longer willing to stay quiet. Because sometimes, the loudest change starts with the softest voices. And America's silent war? It was finally being heard.